understand why thousands of beautiful, healthy young statues must fall. Smoke and explosions surround me.
Finally, a crane came, lifted the vehicle, got the guy out that was pinned by his leg, who had morphine already injected in him, and the Special Forces medics got the other guy up, and he had a pulse. He was still alive. And I heard on the radio going back to Kirkuk that he had died before he could reach the clinic. And for some reason that struck me pretty hard. For 9 nights I didn't sleep. I realized that there's a great possibility that he died, hearing everybody around him and knowing that nobody was coming to his aid. In the tents at night, in the pitch dark, I couldn't stop thinking about how it felt being trapped under a Humvee and possibly not being able to catch a breath and cry for help. And then I really got disturbed when I realized, despite all the Iraqi bodies I had seen throughout Iraq, it was an American soldier that made me disturbed. And so for several months after that, and still today, I wrestle with, what does that mean? That I saw all these Iraqis dead, or whatever nationals they were, but it took an American soldier, someone of my own race and creed and skin color, to wake me up out of this kind of slumber.
The reason I am doing this today is not only for myself and for the rest of society to hear, but it's for all those who can't be here to talk about the things that we went through, talk about the things that we did.
This was a really big switch from what we'd been used to for the first 5 months. We had gone from basically very, it was called the escalation of force, to which is how we had to respond to a situation where basically you'd only respond to deadly force under very specific conditions. But now it was basically we were going to be operating under the assumption that everyone was hostile. He sort of wrapped up the brief by sort of going, okay, Marines, you see an individual with a weapon, what do you do? Sort of a mutter in silence for a minute, waiting for someone else to answer, and one guy said, shoot him. Battalion JAG officer said, no. Shooting at a target, putting rounds downrange and suppressing a target is one thing. Sighting in and killing a target is another. So again, you see an individual with a weapon, what do you do? Kill him. You see an individual with a pair of binoculars, what do you do? Kill him. You see an individual with a cell phone out, what do you do? Kill him. You see an individual who, although maybe not being actually carrying anything or displaying any specific hostile action or intent, running from, say, one building to another, or running across the street, or even running away from you, assume that he is maneuvering against you and kill him.
There are two specific things I would like to address about the operation of Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. One is the issue of torture. I've heard a lot of speculation as to what torture is considered. First and foremost, I would like to ask of everyone, well, I don't really expect an answer, but just for your own considerations, whether or not living inside of a cell for 5 years away from your family and your friends without ever being given any answers as to why you're there, asking 19-year-old boys that don't have any idea about the policy of our government and the politics that make these things happen, why they're there, and the answers that we weren't able to give, I consider that torture.
I cannot live this way. No, I cannot live with doubt and confusion. They find me, they run up right behind me. I cannot die this way.
A soldier came up to me later and ended up telling me that, hey, he died during questioning, during his interrogation, and I'm thinking to myself, how tough is a question have to be to kill? I don't know exactly what went on during his interrogation, but he was fine when I had him. Days after he was taken from my custody, I had in my custody his 14-year-old son, a very bright child, spoke 4 languages. He was supposed to be taken to his father. I was told that, loosen his tongue up, get him to talk a little more, just try to get him to cooperate more. And instead, that boy was being taken to identify his father's body.
But when Marines are put in a situation where they receive fire and all they see is a muzzle flash coming from a building, and they don't have positive identification, but they know that if they return fire through that window or towards that building, that they're more likely to live through whatever's going on. It's a really difficult situation, and I think it's criminal to put such patriotic Americans who have sworn an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America in a situation where their morals are at odds with their survival instincts.
After all the paperwork was gone, I finally had a chance to sit down with my interpreter and just ask, what was all that paperwork? Well, come to find out, we destroyed all the birth certificates of the city of Fallujah.
The sergeant in charge would come and tell me to get him up off his feet. So I'd have to pick him up and put him against the wall. And he kept going down. I just have to keep pulling him up and putting him against the wall. And my sergeant came along and he was upset with me for not, making him, continue to stand. He picked him up and slammed him against the wall several times. And then he left, and when the man went down on the ground again, I noticed blood pouring down from under the sandbag. And so I let him sit, and when I noticed my sergeant coming again, I would tell him quickly to stand up. And then I realized that I was supposed to be guarding my unit from this detainee, and at that point I realized I was guarding the detainee from my unit. And I tried hard to be proud of my service, but all I could feel was shame. And racism could no longer mask the reality of the occupation. These were people, these were human beings. We were told we were fighting terrorists. The real terrorist was me, and the real terrorism is this occupation. Racism within the military has long been an important tool to justify the destruction and occupation of another country. It has long been used to justify the killing, subjugation, and torture of another people. Poor and working people in this country are sent to kill poor and working people in another country to make the rich richer. And without racism, soldiers would realize that they have more in common with the Iraqi people than they do with the billionaires who send us to war.
When I pulled out my compass, I made the grave error of taking a compass reading next to a 240 machine gun, which had a high amount of metal content in it. I gave the false azimuth, and the top took my azimuth as true. He then asked for the distance at which the blast was, and I told him it was approximately 5.5 to 6 kilometers. This I did under the supervision of my lieutenant and my sergeant. They launched one barrage of mortars, 81 millimeters, and asked me if I had eyes on the target and if I had seen impact. I had said no. They fired again and again. And on the 4th barrage, I was already turning the road, and we were pulling away to go for a more secured position. I had reported back that this target was out of range, and I was unable to spot rounds anymore, and I did not see any smoke or any mortar's impact. They continued to fire a 5th and 6th barrage into an Afghani village.
I cannot die this way. No, I cannot die this way. No, 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 no. No, no, no.